Chapter 3. From the Memoirs of Rogi and Remillard. I was born in 1945, in the northern New Hampshire mill town of Berlin. My twin brother Donatien and I took our first breaths on 12 August, 2 days after Japan opened the peace negotiations that would end World War II. Our mother, Adele, was stricken with labour pains at early Sunday Mass, but with the stubbornness so characteristic of our clan, gave no indication of it until the last notes of the recessional hymn had been sung. Then her brother-in-law Louis and his wife drove her to St. Luke's, where she delivered of us and died. Our father Joseph had perished 6 months earlier at the Battle of Iwo Jima. On the day of our birth, clouds of radioactivity from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were still being carried around the world by the jet stream winds. But they had nothing to do with our mutations. The genes for metapsychic operancy lay dormant in many other families beside ours. The immortality gene, however, was apparently unique. Neither trait would be recognized for what it was until many years had gone by. Don and I, husky orphans, had a legacy from our mother of a GI insurance policy and an antique mantelpiece clock. We were taken in by Uncle Louis and Tante Lorraine. It meant 2 more mouths to feed in a family that already included 6 children. But Louis Remillard was a foreman at the big Berlin paper mill that also employed other males of our clan, and would employ Don and me in good time. He was a stocky, powerful man, with one leg slightly shorter than the other, and he earned good wages and owned a 2-story frame apartment on 2nd Street that was old but well maintained. We lived on the ground floor, and Uncle Alain and Tante Grace and their even larger brood lived upstairs. Life was cheerful, if extremely noisy. My brother and I seemed to be quite ordinary children. Like most Franco-Americans of the region, we grew up speaking French to our kinfolk, but used English quite readily in our dealings with non-Francophone neighbours and playmates, who were in the majority. The family ghost, when I first met it, also spoke French. It happened on an unforgettable day when I was 5. A gang of us cousins piled into the back of an old pickup truck owned by Gerard, the eldest. We had a collection of pots and pans and pails, and were off on a raspberry picking expedition into the National Forest, west of town, a cut-over wilderness beyond the York Pond fish hatchery. The berries were sparse that year, and scattered wildly, working a maze of overgrown logging tracks. Don and I had been warned to stick close to our cousin Cecile, who was 14 and very responsible. But she was a slow and methodical picker, while we 2 skipped from patch to patch, skimming the easily reached fruit, and not bothering with the berries that were harder to get. Then we got lost. We were separated not only from Cecile and the other cousins, but from each other. It was one of the first times I can remember being really apart from my twin brother, and it was very frightening. I wandered around whimpering for more than an hour. I was afraid that if I gave in to panic and bawled, I would be punished by having no whipped cream on my raspberry slump at supper. It began to get dark. I called feebly, but there was no response. Then I came into an area that was a dense tangle of brambles, all laden with luscious berries, and there, not 10 meters away, stood a big black bear, chomping and slurping. "Donny!" I screamed. Dropping my little berry pail, I took to my heels. The bear did not follow. I stumbled over decaying slash and undergrowth, dodged around rotted stumps, and came to a place where sapling paper birches had sprung up. Their crowded trunks were like white broom handles. I could scarcely push my way through. Perhaps I would be safe there from the bear. "Donny, where are you?" I yelled, still terror-stricken. I seemed to hear him say, "Over here." "Where?" I was weeping and nearly blind. "I'm lost! Where are you?" He said, "Right here. I can hear you even though it's quiet. Isn't that funny?" I howled. I shrieked. It was not funny. "A bear is after me!" He said, "I think I see you, but I don't see the bear." "I can only see you when I close my eyes, though. That's funny, too. Can you see me, Rogi?" "No, no," I wept. Not only did I not see him, but I began to realize that I didn't really hear him either, except in some strange way that had nothing to do with my ears. Again and again I screamed my brother's name. I wandered out of the birch grove into more rocky open land and started to run. I heard Don say, "Here's Cecile and Joe and Gerard. Let's find out if they can see you too." The voice in my mind was drowned out by my own sobbing. It was twilight, entre chien et loup, as we used to say. I was crying my heart out, not looking where I was going, running between two great outcroppings. "Arrête!" commanded a loud voice. At the same time, something grabbed me by the back of my overall straps, yanking me off my feet. I gave a shattering screech, flailed my arms, and twisted my neck to look over my shoulder, expecting to see black fur and tusks. There was nothing there. I hung in the air for an instant, too stupefied to utter a sound. Then I was lowered gently to earth, and the same adult voice said, "Bon courage, petit frère. Maintenant c'est très bien." The invisible thing was telling me not to be afraid, that everything was now all right. What a hope! I burst into hysterical whoops and wet my underpants. The voice soothed me in familiar Canaquois, sounding rather like my younger uncle Elaine. An unseen hand smoothed my tousled black curls. I screwed my eyes shut. A ghost. It was a ghost that had snatched me up. Oh, it would feed me to the bear. "No, no," the voice insisted. "I won't harm you, little one. I want to help you. Look here, beyond the two large rocks, a very steep ravine. You would have fallen and hurt yourself badly. You might have been killed. And yet I know nothing of the sort happened. So I saved you myself. And c'est le début du paradoxe." "A ghost!" I wailed. "You're a ghost!" I can hear the thing's mind voice laughing even now as it said, "Exactement, mais un fantôme familier." Thus I was introduced to the being who would help me, advise me, and bedevil me at many critical points in my life. The family ghost took my hand and drew me along a shadowy, twisted game trail, making me run so fast I was left nearly breathless and forgot to cry. It reassured me, but warned me not to mention our meeting to anyone, since I would not be believed. All too probably brother and cousins would laugh at me and call me a baby. It would be much better to tell them how bravely I had faced the bear. As the first stars began to show, I emerged from the forest onto the road near the fish hatchery where the pickup truck stood. My cousins and the fishmen were there and welcomed me with relieved shouts. I told them I had flung my berry bucket in a bear's face, cleverly gaining time to make my escape. My brother Don did look at me strangely, and I was aware of a question hovering just behind his lips. But then he scowled and was silent. I got doubled whipped cream on my raspberry slump that night. I told nobody about the family ghost. To understand the mind of our family, you should know something about our heritage. The Remillards are members of that New England ethnic group descended from French Canadians, who are variously called Franco-American, Canado-American, or more simply Kanak. The family name is a fairly common one, now pronounced Remillard, in a straightforward Yankee way. As far as I've been able to discover, no other branches of the family harboured so precocious a set of supravital genetic traits for high metafunction and self-rejuvenation. The bodiless mutagene came from poor Teresa, as I shall relate in due time. Our ancestors settled in Quebec in the middle 1600s and worked the land as French peasants have done from time immemorial. Like their neighbours, they were an industrious, rather bloody-minded folk who looked with scorn upon such novelties as crop rotation and fertilization of the soil. At the same time, they were fervent Roman Catholics who regarded it as their sacred duty to have large families. The predictable result, in the harsh climate of the St. Lawrence River Valley, was economic disaster. By the mid-19th century, the worn-out, much subdivided land provided no more than a bare subsistence, no matter how hard the farmers worked. In addition to the struggle required to earn a living, there was also political oppression from the English-speaking government of Canada. An insurrection among the habitants in 1837 was mercilessly crushed by the Canadian Army. But one must not think of these hardy, troublesome people as miserable or downtrodden. Au contraire, they remained indomitable, lusty, and intensely individualistic, cherishing their large families and their stern parish priests. Their devotion to home and religion was more than strong. It was fierce, leading to that solidarity, a species of the coercive metafaculty, that milieu anthropologists call ethnic dynamism. The Quebec habitants not only survived persecution and a grim environment, they even managed to increase and multiply in it. At the same time that the French-Canadian population was outstripping the resources of the North, the Industrial Revolution came to the United States. New England rivers were harnessed to provide power for the booming textile mills, and there was a great demand for labourers who would work long hours for low salaries. Some of these jobs were taken by the immigrant Irish, themselves refugees from political oppression and economic woe, who were also formidably dynamic. But French Canadians also responded to the lure of the factories and flocked southward by the tens of thousands to seek their fortunes. This migratory trend continued well into the 1900s. Little Canadas sprang up in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Rhode Island. The newcomers clung to their French language and to much of their traditional culture, and most especially to their Catholic faith. They were thrifty and diligent, and their numerous offspring followed the parents into the family occupation. They became American citizens and worked not only as mill hands but also as carpenters, mechanics, lumberjacks, and keepers of small shops. Most often, only those children who became priests or nuns received higher education. Gradually, the French Canadians began to blend into the American mainstream as other ethnic groups had done. They might have been quite rapidly assimilated, if it hadn't been for the Irish. Ah, how we Franco-Americans hated the Irish! You citizens of the milieu who read this, knowing what you do of the principal human bloodlines for metapsychic operancy, will appreciate the irony. Both the Irish and the French minorities in New England were Celts, of a passionate and contentious temperament. Both were, in the latter 19th and early 20th centuries, rivals for the same type of low-status employment. Both had endured persecution in their homelands and social and religious discrimination in America because of their Catholic faith. But the Irish were much more numerous, and they had the tremendous social advantage of speaking the English language, with a rare flair at that. The Irish parlayed their genius for politicking and self-aggrandizement into domination of the New England Catholic hierarchy, and even took over entire city governments. We Francos were more aloof, politically naive, lacking in what Yankees called team spirit, because with us it was the family that came first. With our stubbornly held traditions and French language, we became an embarrassment and a political liability to our more ambitious co-religionists. It was an era fraught with anti-Catholic sentiment, in which all Catholics were suspected of being un-American. So the shrewd Irish-American bishops decreed that the stiff-necked Canucks must be forcibly submerged into the great melting pot. They tried to abolish those parishes and parochial schools where the French language was given first place. They said that we must become like other Americans, let ourselves be assimilated as the other ethnic groups were doing. Assimilate? Intermarry? And the genes for metapsychic operancy would be diluted all unawares. But the great pattern was not to be denied. We Francos fought the proposed changes with the same obstinacy that had made us the despair of the British Canadians. The actions of those arrogant Irish bishops during the 19th century made us more determined than ever to cling to our heritage, and we did. Eventually the bishops saved face with what were termed compromises, but we kept our French churches, our schools, and our language. For the most part, we continued to marry our own, increasing our homozygosity, concentrating those remarkable genes that would put us in the vanguard of humanity's next great evolutionary leap. It was not until World War II smashed the old American social structures and prejudices that the Canucks of New England were truly assimilated. Our ethnocentricity melted away almost painlessly in those post-war years of my early childhood. But it had prevailed long enough to produce Don and me, and the others whose existence we never suspected until long after we reached adulthood.